Hey everyone, my name is Brady Whitten and this is The Word Meets the World for November 3rd, 2021. So a criminal complaint was filed last week against former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who's being charged with sexual misconduct for allegedly groping a female aide. This criminal complaint follows in the wake of allegations by 11 women who've accused Cuomo of sexual harassment, resulting in his resignation as governor in August. At Louisiana State University, conversations about player sexual misconduct and Title IX violations have emerged as part of the search for a new football coach. One of the complaints about outgoing head coach Ed Orgeron is that he allegedly mishandled sexual misconduct claims made against his players. According to sports management professor David Ridpath, however, there are few coaches out there that haven't been tainted by this type of scandal. So these are just two of the many stories about sexual harassment and sexual misconduct that are making headlines. And people's reactions run the gamut from boys will be boys to intense outrage. But what does the Bible have to say about sex and sexual ethics? And how should we as Christians approach this subject? That's our topic for today's The Word Meets the World. So what does the Bible say about sex and sexual ethics, and how should we as Christians approach the subject? It seems like the headlines are constantly filled with stories of a sexual nature: sexual harassment, misconduct, adultery, and worse. And the church itself has been implicated with disturbing regularity. Now, I want to make sure you know that I'm aware that sexual abuse is ultimately about power and not about sexual desire. But there's no denying that the human sexual impulse is a part of the equation. So for the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to focus on the complex and sensitive topic of human sexuality and sexual ethics in a three-part series. And so I want to talk about the joy of sex, I want to talk about sexual ethics, and then finally I want to talk about same-gender relationships. But this week, I want to dive into the idea of the joy of sex. So in its attempt to teach and uphold sexual ethics, the church is often perceived as anti-sex and even anti-enjoyment. When I was growing up, the church conversation about sex could be summarized with Nike's famous slogan, but in reverse: just don't do it. But a quick look at the Bible reveals this sex and enjoyment denying message does not come from the good book. To start with, it is God's self who created the human body and all of its parts. And so it's fascinating to me how much of this goes back to Genesis, where God created. So we read in Genesis 1:27, "So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God he created them, male and female he created them." And Psalm 139:13 says this, "For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb." See, God created our ears, God created our eyes, God created our hands and our feet. God also created our sexual organs. And how about this? It's God who created the orgasm. And did you know that the first commandment that God gave to people was to have sex? We read it right here in Genesis 1:28. It says, "God blessed them, and God said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth.'" Now, this is not intended to be a biology lesson, but there's only one way that whole "be fruitful and multiply" thing happens. The Bible also tells us that some of life's greatest blessings come from sex. Psalm 127:3 says, "Children are indeed a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward." And it's not only children that come from sex, but families and all that come with them. Think about it. No sex, no babies. No babies, no children. No children, no families. No families, no family dinners, no family movie nights, no evenings by a fire, no warm snuggles. You think about it. Some of life's greatest blessings and joys begin with sex. And again, it was all God's creation, all God's idea. But listen, sex is not just about making babies. Christian writer Jamie Ballard says that although followers of God have been instructed to be fruitful and multiply, sex isn't meant solely for procreation. It's also meant to be a joyful, intimate experience between partners. Genesis 2:24 reads, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they will become one flesh." Now, I want to pause here and remind you that I am going to talk about same-gender relationships in the third installment of this series. But for now, it would take us too far afield to chase that, so just bear with me. So what does it mean to become one flesh? Obviously, this refers to physical intimacy, but it also suggests that within a relationship, two people's hearts and souls can become so intertwined that they effectively become one. They share the joys and the pains of life, and what affects one affects the other. One of my favorite books on the power of sex to create spiritual and emotional intimacy is a book by Rob Bell called Sex God. And if this subject interests you, I really encourage you to get the book and read it. So, according to the Bible, God created sex. God commands us to do it. Sex makes babies and families, and it can bond people together physically, spiritually, and emotionally. But according to the Bible, sex is also a source of just pleasure and enjoyment. Did you know that there's an entire book in the Bible that celebrates sexual love? I'm amazed that a lot of people don't know this. The book is known as the Song of Solomon, or sometimes called the Song of Songs. And it's written from the perspective of two lovers praising and yearning for each other. So this is what we read in Song of Solomon, chapter 7, verses 6 through 9. "How beautiful you are, and how pleasing, my love, with your delights. Your stature is like that of a palm tree, and your breasts like clusters of fruit. I said, I will climb the palm tree. I will take a hold of its fruit. May your breasts be like clusters of grapes on the vine, the fragrance of your breath like apples, and your mouth like the best wine." Now, there is some debate about why Song of Solomon was included in the biblical canon. Some suggest it can be read as a mystical love poem between people and God. Others say that it simply reflects one of the central parts of what it means to be a human being, sexual desire and pleasure. So what does the Bible say about sex and sexual ethics, and how should we as Christians approach the subject? Our starting place must be to recognize sex as a good and a beautiful gift from God. According to the Bible, God is the creator of sex. God commands us to have sex. Sex makes babies and families. It brings two people as physically and spiritually close to one another as they can be, and it's a source of pleasure and joy. And this has to be our starting place. First of all, because it's true. Second of all, if we fail to embrace the beauty and joy of sex, what we have to say next will likely fall on deaf ears. Because as good as a gift as sex is, the human sexual drive can also be a very destructive force. Without proper boundaries, it can lead to broken hearts, broken marriages, broken families, children with unstable beginnings in life, physical and spiritual disease. Like all of God's good gifts, we can twist and distort sex into something harmful and destructive. And that's where we're going to pick up next time as we turn our attention to this topic of sexual ethics. But what do you think about all this? What do you think about the joy of sex? I want to leave you with a few questions that you can discuss with a group or others, or maybe these are things you can just think about on your own. But before I put those questions up, I do want to encourage you to like and to share this video. Let others know about it. And also like, subscribe, and follow First United Methodist Church on whatever social media platform you're on. See you next time, everyone.